Welcome to the Clara and Horatio Daily World Brief, available at claraandhoratio.com. Today is Monday, July 20, 2026, and we are looking at the human and civic consequences of a rapidly changing global map. I mean, we have to start with the expanding Middle East war because the U.S. military has now conducted its 10th consecutive night of strikes on Iranian targets.
Which directly follows the collapse of that mid-June ceasefire. The targeting is, well, it's highly specific and escalatory.
Yeah.
U.S. forces have hit areas near Bushehr, which is an incredibly sensitive location because it houses Iran's only civilian nuclear plant.
They've also struck near Tabriz in the northwest, trying to degrade Iran's ability to launch attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. But the motivation behind this specific wave of U.S. strikes is rooted in a devastating human cost.
It is direct retaliation for Iranian missile attacks that killed U.S. troops at an air base in Jordan. The official U.S. military death toll in this conflict now sits at 17.
U.S. President Donald Trump stated, Iran will pay many times over for those casualties, and the administration has explicitly claimed that the United States currently controls the Strait of Hormuz. But you have the Iranian president publicly declaring the country is in a full-scale war, citing prior agreements that they say give Tehran administrative rights over the waterway.
Those competing claims of control seem entirely detached from the reality on the water, which looks like absolute chaos.
Sure.
The Greek shipping firm Dynacom recently confirmed multiple projectile strikes on its tankers, forcing a full crew evacuation because of an uncontrollable engine room fire.
Meaning no single state actually has this waterway secured? That lack of security translates instantly to public consequence for household budgets because the Strait of Hormuz is functionally closed to standard commercial traffic.
And that drastic reduction in global oil supply moving out of the Persian Gulf is exactly why we're seeing average U.S. gas prices jump back above $4 a gallon this week.
The ripple effects go far beyond the gas pump, too. Corporate logistics are taking a massive hit, like the airline Ryanair, for example, which just reported a severe profit drop due to the soaring cost of unhedged jet fuel.
We should probably clarify the mechanism there for the listener. Airlines typically buy fuel futures to hedge their bets, locking in a set price months in advance to protect against exactly this kind of sudden geopolitical shock.
But Ryanair operates with a largely unhedged fuel strategy, so they purchase fuel much closer to the current market rate to capitalize when prices are low. When a choke point like Hormuz virtually shuts down and the spot price of oil skyrockets overnight, their operating costs just explode,
Instantly tanking their profit margins. This economic weaponization is spreading geographically as well, with Yemen's Houthis announcing a maritime embargo on Saudi Arabia.
which is a tit-for-tat escalation responding to recent Saudi strikes on Houthi airports. We are looking at a cascading failure in regional shipping across multiple borders.
The friction is forcing significant shifts in political leadership, too. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has just elected Khalil al-Hayya as its new overall leader, succeeding the late Yahya Sinwar.
Selecting a hardline negotiator at this exact moment signals a retrenchment, a preparation for prolonged confrontation rather than diplomatic concession. And the established international legal frameworks meant to govern these actors are bending violently under the pressure.
Back in the U.S., President Trump declared that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not be arrested during any U.S. visit, brushing off threats from New York City's mayor regarding the 2024 ICC arrest warrant.
It raises a fascinating jurisdictional collision. A local city police force is theoretically threatening to enforce a Hague-issued international warrant against a visiting head of state, while the federal executive branch outright guarantees immunity.
The tension between modern conflict and established legal frameworks provides a stark transition to Eastern Europe. The maritime reality of the war between Russia and Ukraine is currently being dictated by a treaty signed exactly 90 years ago today, on July 20, 1936.
Before we analyze a document from 1936, the reality in the sky over this conflict is devastatingly modern. Ukraine just launched a massive swarm of over 400 drones at Moscow, representing a massive escalation in asymmetric aerial warfare.
Concurrently, Russia claims a Ukrainian strike on a bus in the border region of Belgorod killed 5 civilians. Yet, despite this fierce fighting on land and in the air, the Black Sea remains largely empty of new warships.
That emptiness is a direct result of Turkey invoking Article 19 of the Montreux Convention. To understand how a 90-year-old treaty halts modern navies, you just have to look at the geography.
The Bosporus Strait is a physical bottleneck running directly through Istanbul. At its narrowest point, it is just 700 meters wide.
By invoking the wartime clause of the treaty, Turkey essentially restored its absolute sovereignty over the Dardanelles and the Bosporus, legally blocking Russian and Ukrainian warships from traversing those waters.
This effectively prevented Russia from reinforcing its Black Sea fleet from the Mediterranean, allowing Ukraine to maintain a maritime upper hand over the last couple of years. The diplomatic guardrail is so rigid, it even stops Western allies.
The UK donated 2 specialized minesweepers to Ukraine, but they are currently docked in southern England because Turkey officially classifies them as vessels of war and refuses them passage. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarineratio.com.
Now, the application of Montreux raises a fundamental question about the nature of warfare. Ukraine didn't build a traditional navy of destroyers to counter Russia. They shifted the entire generation of attack to autonomous sea drones.
If Ukraine is successfully redefining naval dominance using asymmetric unmanned technology, does a 90-year-old treaty focused on heavy steel ship tonnage and physical fleets still hold the same power? Or is it an outdated document failing to govern modern reality?
The treaty absolutely holds enduring diplomatic weight, because challenging means challenging Turkey's core sovereignty and its security status within NATO. It is a rare multilateral mechanism that all parties, including Moscow, still respect.
The technological shift is entirely bypassing the spirit of the document, though. The Montreux Convention meticulously restricts heavy steel warships and submarine passage, but it contains zero legal vocabulary for autonomous swarm technology or sea drones.
The diplomatic barrier holds firm for 20th century technology, but the 21st century traffic moving past it has fundamentally changed.
That severe friction between outdated law and rapidly advancing technology isn't just happening on the water, it is happening in orbit. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty is visibly fraying as both warfare and corporate privatization move aggressively into the heavens.
Physicist Laura Grego is warning that the public is dangerously unaware we have built a literal doomsday system in space. We rely on a network of satellites to provide the early warning system for intercontinental ballistic missile launches.
The physics of an ICBM trajectory dictate that it pops above the Earth's atmosphere and crosses the globe in roughly half an hour. Because that travel time is so incredibly short, a U.S. president would have less than 10 minutes to decide on a civilization-ending nuclear retaliation based entirely on those initial satellite signals.
The architecture is built so that the question of massive retaliation gets asked almost immediately, creating an intensely compressed timeline that is highly vulnerable to technological glitches or human panic.
The proposed solutions to this vulnerability sound like aggressive science fiction. The Pentagon is currently circulating internal memos defending a proposed $1.2 trillion Golden Dome defense system.
Grego completely dismisses this as a fool's errand, arguing it is technically unachievable to build an impenetrable shield against modern hypersonic weapons.
It is not just the military making aggressive moves into this unregulated domain. Commercially, SpaceX is applying for regulatory approval to launch up to 1 million satellites, which would completely crowd the orbital lanes and exponentially increase the risk of collision.
The corporate expansion is accompanied by a very deliberate legal strategy. The user agreements for SpaceX's Starlink service already attempt to establish Texas state law as the governing jurisdiction for any disputes occurring in Earth orbit.
Furthermore, these corporate documents explicitly assert that Mars will be considered a self-governing entity. It is a calculated attempt to bypass international legal frameworks like the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which strictly prohibits the national appropriation of celestial bodies.
The physical reality of space exploration is outpacing the law. If a private company builds permanent infrastructure on a lunar south pole to harvest perpetual sunlight and water ice, they are effectively claiming sovereign control of that territory, regardless of what a treaty from the 1960s dictates.
We are passively allowing private corporations to author the legal reality of the cosmos through terms of service agreements. While everyday people look at the stars with wonder, defense contractors and tech billionaires view low Earth orbit as the ultimate unregulated extraction zone and a hair-trigger military domain.
Bringing our focus back down to Earth, we can see how global economic policies and market anxieties are physically reshaping the Americas. U.S. President Trump has imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian imports, notably covering cars, dairy, and alcohol.
He is using the 1930 Tariff Act to escalate these trade tensions, deliberately sidestepping modern frameworks of existing North American free trade agreements. At the same time, the U.S. justice system has definitively closed a massive chapter of transnational crime.
76-year-old Sinaloa cartel co-founder Ismael El Mayo Zambada has been sentenced to life in prison in order to forfeit $15 billion in illicit assets, ending a four-decade era of extreme violence.
Shutting down one aging cartel architect doesn't stop the broader machinery of illicit extraction, especially when global market panics heavily incentivize new forms of environmental crime.
The link between global financial anxiety and physical destruction brings us directly to Brazil. The administration of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is aggressively fighting illegal gold mining in the Serai indigenous territory.
The scale of the physical destruction is staggering. An area half the size of Manhattan has been entirely leveled, the forest canopy stripped away, and river systems poisoned with mercury used in giant industrial sluice boxes.
Global instability has driven gold prices to record highs, which incentivizes heavily armed criminal syndicates, like Rio de Janeiro's Red Command, to deploy heavy industrial equipment into the Amazon, devastating the Nambakara people and their land.
The tragic irony for the listener is glaring. The quest for a safe haven asset in Western financial markets directly funds terrorism and environmental devastation in the Amazon rainforest.
We are also seeing severe domestic political consequences stemming from this exact type of economic instability in Western democracies. In the UK, rapid and systemic changes are unfolding at the highest levels of government.
Andy Burnham has officially taken over as the UK's Prime Minister following the sudden ousting of Keir Starmer. To put the volatility of British politics into perspective, Burnham is the UK's sixth Prime Minister in just 10 years.
Burnham moved quickly, appointing John Healey as his Chancellor of the Exchequer, and promised to bring back hope to a deeply fatigued public.
He is vowing to repair the generational damage of 1980s deindustrialization and rough sleeping and provide immediate, tangible cost of living relief through interventions in energy bills and capping bus fares.
The immediate tension lies between those sweeping political promises to rebuild civil society and the stark mathematical reality of the sovereign bond markets governing the country.
Burnham explicitly stated his government would take a prudent approach to the economy within existing fiscal rules. However, his mere mention of looking for flexibility to borrow money for critical infrastructure triggered immediate panic in the financial markets.
The prices of UK 10-year gilts, essentially the government bonds that dictate the cost of national borrowing, dropped sharply as a result, which means the interest rates the government has to pay spiked.
It demonstrates exactly how tightly constrained modern sovereign governments are by international bond traders when they attempt to enact social change or rebuild degraded infrastructure.
If the bond market doesn't like your pothole repair strategy, they raise your national credit card rate before the speech is even finished.
Looking across these diverse global developments today, a concerning pattern emerges regarding the systems holding our world together. As of today, humanity is attempting to govern autonomous naval drones in the Black Sea using a treaty from 1936.
We are managing international trade wars using a U.S. tariff law from 1930.
And we are relying on a treaty written in 1967 to manage nuclear early warning satellites and private billionaires claiming sovereign jurisdiction over Mars.
The physical world is driven by hyper-connected financial markets, autonomous weapons, and private space exploration. That reality is moving exponentially faster than the 20th century legal frameworks built to protect civil society.
It forces a deeply uncomfortable realization about the fragility of our current era. When these archaic guardrails finally snap completely under the pressure, who exactly gets to write the new rules? Will it be sovereign democratic nations negotiating in good faith, or will it simply be the tech billionaires and defense contractors who already own the satellites, the algorithms, and the infrastructure? Thank you for joining us for this conversation. For more Daily World Briefs and classic audiobooks, visit clarineratio.com.